All right, this is a fun one. So, is Vietnam safe? And no, better. Okay, is Hanoi safe? So, actually, my explanation for this, which I've given to you, I've given to your group, I'm going to go into my little rant about the North versus the South and why it creates a different level of trust in different societies. So this rolls right into the Hanoi and Saigon, and this is actually the last one. So we can basically from this point on, you say whatever you want. One of the things we realized was like the difference between Hanoi and Saigon back on that whole thing was Hanoi has a lot more scams. The English level here is very, very low. And just to be honest, if you are trying to date the females, you are someone who is trying to do the whole dating thing, it is a lot more challenging up here in Hanoi than versus in Saigon. Saigon is wonderful. Everyone is very friendly there. The English level is better, and they're much more open to Western norms. And, me and Ryan, we were hanging out for a couple days, for a couple weeks, we were like, why do the people here seem so much different in the North versus the South? And I'm a little bit of an amateur anthropologist / historian / guy that doesn't really know what the fuck he's talking about, but likes to come up with theories. And I started digging into it a little bit. And so, a little bit of a history lesson. Vietnam used to be a colony of France. It was French Indochina. It was combined with Cambodia and Laos. And here we are in Vietnam. So those three countries. Following what basically, during World War II, the Japanese kind of took over all the colonies. Then eventually the Japanese lost, and the French tried to come back in and reclaim their previously held colony in Indochina. And, but the people the Vietnamese were like, we just kicked out one colonizer, and then you're going to, we thought we were going to be free after that. Now you're going to come in and try to recolonize us. And so Ho Chi Minh, who is a Vietnamese leader, a communist Vietnamese leader, he decided to start partnering with the Soviet Union, who also, was our partner and helped win the World War. And then as we were, the Cold War was developing, he decided hey, if I partner with this great power with the Soviet Union, that'll give me the weapons I need and the resources I need, and that'll help me kick out the French. Well, they were successful at kicking out the French from the North, but the South, which was a major trading hub during this whole time period, the South Vietnamese, they still wanted to have a strong Western relationship. They did not want to be communist. So you had this splinter between the North and the South. And we're all a lot of us are pretty familiar with that. And so from the mid-50s, when the French left and the Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese, won the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, which was a big deal because it was a formerly colonized people kicking the shit out of their former colonizer. After that, the North was fully communist from the mid-50s. However, the South, basically being very foreigner-friendly, they brought in the Americans to help sort of prop up their government and try to keep the South out. And that had worked for a little bit. We obviously had the Vietnam War, which is, a very controversial time in our history for a lot of people and a lot of different reasons. But needless to say, the Americans were here up until 1975, when the fall of Saigon took place, and the Americans completely left. We removed all of our military, we abandoned our embassy, everything. So during this time period, basically from the mid-50s to the mid-70s, the South was completely Western oriented. It was doing capitalism. It was doing democracy, you could argue, a form of it. But it was open to the West and had Western style norms. And then all of a sudden it got subsumed by the North, which had been communist for this entire time period, this whole 20-year time period. Fast forward to 1986, Vietnam starts to decide that it wants to start liberalizing its economy. So it started building factories. It started developing relationships with the U.S. and other Western countries because it wanted to build up its economy. And so most of that took place where it had already previously been, which was in South Vietnam. And so 1975, the fall of Saigon, up to 1986, all of a sudden they start liberalizing again. And so the South Vietnam was really only strictly communist for about 11 years versus Hanoi, which arguably is still, this is where the capital is where the majority of the Communist Party is. And so it still is a very, very communist-oriented society. And believe it or not, communists are actually very traditionalist. Most countries that are whether you're talking about the Soviet Union or anywhere else in South, in any of these countries that were historically part of sort of a Marxist-Leninist tradition, all of them were very much about conservative values. Now, in some cases, they would destroy their sort of really nativist traditions, but they were always very much focused on sort of preserving things the way they were and not being super open to a lot of new ideas. So North Vietnamese, they tended to stay a little bit more in their traditional ways, whereas South Vietnam opened way up to, stayed really open to Western norms. The reason this is important because historically, most countries that are communist or former communist, they heavily, because the government takes care of people and they're less reliant on trade and personal relationships, what you end up having in the North is a high trust society, in the South, in the North is a low trust society, and in the South is a high trust society. And what ends up happening from that is a lot of people, because there's not already built-in trust and sort of social relationships built up, you end up developing sort of a scammer culture where a lot more people, because there's not much reliance on sort of like a pride in honesty and my word is my bond and other stuff like that. It's like it becomes a little, oddly enough, conversely, actually turns into a little more of a more selfish society of you don't really care if you're screwing someone else over as long as you're getting your own. And that is honestly what ends up happening in a lot of communist societies. And so you still see a higher degree of sort of dishonest behavior, looking over your shoulder and different stuff like that in the North versus the South, which I have to be honest, Saigon may be one of my favorite cities in the world, if not my actual absolute favorite. Every time I've gone there, I've absolutely loved it. I thought it was amazing. So this is not a knock on Vietnam at all, but it is also being able to tell the contrast between somewhere that is amazing, like Ho Chi Minh, and being able to tell the difference between somewhere that's Hanoi, that while it does have its strong suits, there are things you absolutely need to be aware of in order for you to make a good judgment call as far as like your day-to-day activity. And if you've never been to Ho Chi Minh and you could only go to one, Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh, absolutely Ho Chi Minh, 8 days a week. That was really long. I'm going to let Ryan do his thing.
All right. Yeah, I would say overall, definitely Ho Chi Minh a lot better. Just overall, I agree with, I don't know as much as the historical aspects, the political aspects, as he was mentioning. They do sound relatively accurate, like just because the South and the North have a different history, different politics, people's behaviors are a lot different. And yeah, definitely, like I mentioned here, they're a lot more conservative. Definitely, I think the biggest shock was like the English is a lot lower than even, like I've been to Central Vietnam as well, and I've been to Ho Chi Minh, Da Nang, Hue, which is the old capital. I think that's it. And then Hanoi, in this kind of general area, right? And definitely the English levels here are by far the lowest. Like it's not even comparable. Like Ho Chi Minh, you're here, like a lot of English, a lot of international schools, businesses. Yeah, they're conversational. It's more like pro-international kind of, whereas here, like it goes. Then maybe Da Nang is somewhere in the middle. Oddly enough, in Da Nang, a lot of people speak Korean because there's so many Korean tourists. So that's
speak Korean, so that's
yeah, it works for me. But yeah, then you have like Da Nang, maybe Hue, and then like Hanoi, probably the lowest level of English I've seen. So yeah, that's one aspect. You're going to do a lot of Google Translate. I would say, hey, if you're trying to learn Vietnamese, then probably a better city to be in. I mean, I don't really know anyone learning Vietnamese. Good if you are. That's pretty cool, I think. But yeah, I would say if you're really trying to like dig in and learn Vietnamese, maybe this would be a better city because you're forced to speak Vietnamese pretty much every day, everywhere you go, right? But yeah, that's the language aspect. In terms of the culture, people are a lot more guarded here, right? So I remember like talking to random strangers, here and there on the street or like on the beach or in the cafes out in Ho Chi Minh. And guess what? People were very open, very warm, very friendly. And that was kind of my image of Vietnam. Like people are always warm, people are friendly, they're outgoing. English can be okay, pretty good or okay. Then you come to Hanoi and you start talking to random strangers and they're very guarded. They're very, a little bit standoffish, a little bit more of a conservative shell, very low English, as I mentioned. And so there's, yeah, definitely a big gap, right? And I think as he mentioned, I also think there's like the history of like probably that makes people on guard up here as well, like, right? Like with the Japanese, the French, and then also this is close to China. Literally, if you look, like a lot of people here go to Sapa, which is up in the mountains. It's a popular tourist destination. And it's really close to China. It's almost like, I don't know, like not that many kilometers up to China. So when you have the history of like Chinese invasion and they're fighting over these islands and stuff like that, I guess you just have a general caution probably towards outsiders, foreigners. Korea has that same thing where Korea has a history of all these invasions from Mongolia to China to Japan to what have you. So they also have that sort of like, there's us and them and the foreigners and us. And kind of this natural sort of conservative distrust towards outsiders, right? So I would say it's kind of similar in that regard. Other things between Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi, I do like the food here. I think I mentioned that before. The food out here is probably a little better. The pho is definitely better. Banh mi's, though, I would say Ho Chi Minh had better banh mi's. And I asked it.
I'm going to disagree with you on that. I like the banh mi's.
He likes the banh mi's here. Okay. I think overall the food is probably better up here. What else about Ho Chi Minh versus Hanoi? I would also say that, okay, here's one thing. Okay. I want to say positive things about Hanoi. The positives are there's cool area, like whereas Ho Chi Minh, you really only have the Ho Chi Minh City area. A lot of other places are kind of far away. People go out to Nha Trang and they go to these other places, but they're not really that close. Whereas in Hanoi, if you're into nature and stuff like that, highly recommend going out to Ninh Binh, which is really cool. Really beautiful gorges, mountains, the historical city. You can go out to Halong Bay and Kat Pa. You can go out to Sapa up in the mountains. That's very popular. So if you're looking to go to the mountains, the sea, looking at more natural destinations, this definitely beats Ho Chi Minh. But if you're looking for like an urban atmosphere, if you're looking for like a cool city to like stay longer term in, there's no contest. Definitely you got to go to Ho Chi Minh. And yeah, like I said, like people here are just generally more standoffish. I could see it'd be really harder to even make friends, like let alone, dating, making friends would be a lot harder here just because the English level is so much lower as well, right? So yeah, any other thoughts on Hanoi? I still would recommend coming here. However, you could probably worth like a week trip and then you can do, yeah, a month is probably overkill. A month in Saigon would be good. I would definitely recommend that. Yeah, but like I would say maybe do a week and then you can also split off, go up to Sapa, go to Ninh Binh, go to Halong Bay, hit all the other little, there's a lot of little like outskirt areas that you can bounce around to. So yeah, any other final thoughts? I think that's about it for now, but yeah.
So yeah, pretty much covered it. Thanks, Ryan. So the big thing is, the one thing I would disagree with is I did think the food up here was measurably better. This is the best pho you'll ever have consistently. It was really hard for me to find a really, really good pho in the South. So that's one thing I would say, and I do like the banh mi's up here more. But just to be clear, I'm a chef and he's not. So I think my opinion carries a little more weight. However, yeah, but anyway, some of the other stuff that we only just really quickly brushed down on, if you guys are interested in some of that, if you're watching this, you scroll down a little bit on my homepage, I have a whole series that's dedicated all of my Hanoi stuff. So it's like different scams, like different gym recommendations, co-working space. And then we did go out to Kat Pa and I made a little recommendation between Halong and Kat Pa that you might be interested in if you found this pretty interesting. Aside from that, hey, Ryan, since this is on your channel too, do whatever promote whatever you want to promote before we wrap it up.
If you enjoyed this video, I do have a few cool videos on the local food. So there are a few dishes, everybody knows banh mi, everybody knows pho. So I explored a few videos. I explored local dishes that are either prominent in Hanoi or less common in other parts of Vietnam that more locals are into, like bún riêu, like the sticky rice, xôi xiao, and then also the sticky tapioca dumplings. And then also I recently did a couple videos on Ninh Binh, which highly, highly recommend checking out if you're coming up to Hanoi. I actually enjoyed it a lot better than Halong Bay and even Kat Pa Island, so you can check those videos out as well.
All right. And signing off.